We are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Water Wisdom Podcast. Get your water. We're always coding our water. Here's my Kangen water. If you want to learn about Kangen water, look in the description. If you would like to donate to Charitywater, look in the description. And if you would like to support the podcast, look in the description. Everything's in the description. I'm so happy to welcome everyone to the podcast today. We have an amazing guest who I've actually been blessed to meet in the physical. I have so many connections online, and most people I have not even met, but Jack and I have actually hung out a couple of times. So I'm super honored to welcome Jack Coleman to the podcast. Hello, Jack.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. It's good to chat with you here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. So I'm going to give Jack a little bit of an introduction and we're going to dive in. So Jack is a mindset mentor and inventor. And I like to call him a quantum theorist. I don't know if he claims that title, but I'm giving you that title, Jack. Is that okay?
Yeah.
A quantum theorist. That's good, right?
Philosopher. I like to, I like to philosophize, I guess you could say. So, a lot of mind mapping.
Perfect. All right, let's dive in. I love to start the podcast with a question, kind of a deep question, little intuitive, activation here. Jack, will you tell us what is your divine mission in this world?
Oh boy.
Oh, I know it's a deep one. Don't
Yeah.
overthink it. I love to open with that, and everybody's always like, I don't know, but like we should be able to answer this question, right?
Absolutely. It's I have three main things that I have put my heart and soul into. But there's obviously, I can rank them. And the biggest one is this theory that I've been writing since 2012. So I would say that's my die hard. That's my, ride or die, till death do I part with it. Literally, I don't think I would ever quit this for anything, any circumstance imaginable. And obviously, things can change in the future, but I've given up quite a bit for this theory, and I've spent obviously a lot of time, attention, and energy, but also given up a lot of other things in life in order to dedicate myself to it and try to make it as holistic as possible, because that's my goal in it, is to make it the most well-rounded kind of jack of all trade theory that can basically totally inclusive. So totally inclusive theory. That means nothing is excluded in this philosophy of the universe. So yeah, that's my main life purpose. And then I've built a couple of things because of that. One is mentoring, like the way that I go about my mentoring in particular. It's not necessarily a program or a certification that I took. I do have some certifications, but my style is mainly birthed from this theory and the principles within the theory. And then this energy device is also based on the same sort of approach, where it's based on the principles in my theory. And I've taken information from the theory, applied it to some current technologies that are already out there. What I'm making isn't really far out. I'm not like a crazy mad scientist or anything like that, but I have spliced together a lot of cool concepts to try and make this energy device as potent as possible, and also as user-friendly as possible. So I'm trying to make an all-in-one kind of device, and more of an open source device, so you can use it for several different things, which is really cool. And one of them in particular, I would say, is probably going to be pretty popular. And so yeah, those three things all together is my life purpose, and everything else seems to surround that.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so we will dive much deeper into all of that. But before we do, let's go backwards a little bit in time. I want to talk about your awakening journey. Like I always ask people, were you born woke? Were you born woke?
I've always been woke.
It took me a long time. But people have stories about like these psychic activations that they have when they're younger. I'm going to interview a lady who she remembers extraterrestrials like coming into her room when she was a baby. Like that is wild. That is super cool, but not all of us have that experience. And I want to activate people through your awakening journey, because it's like we hear all these stories, but how do you really ground it in? And how do you really connect with someone with their story and identify with, the crazy mystical experience or the like treacherous, painful experience, because a lot of people awaken in that way. So tell us a little bit about like what happened for Jack. I feel like you were young.
No,
No,
or I saw relative, let's throw
I mean,
that
because I think it's
principle.
because I feel so much older than
Yeah,
you.
right.
Jack's a baby.
You're like 5 years older than me or something like
No,
that. Yeah.
you're right.
You're
I'm
like
42. I'm 42. So
oh yeah,
36,
36. Yeah. So 6 years, but
6 years.
yeah, I guess like I felt, yeah, compared to everyone else where they're like they remember being birthed, and I was like 2 years old when my first
I don't
memory came
remember.
in. Yeah. And most people don't, so in terms of like the spiritual activation, I think everyone kind of approaches it in a I mean has been approached by it, let's say it's choosing us in some sort of capacity
I
from
like
our
that.
higher selves. Yeah. Because ultimately we all have to be ready for it, and I think that's why some awakenings can be more disastrous for people. It's but also everything has a reason, so everything is supposed to happen when it's supposed to happen and how it's supposed to happen. So we have to accept that, and if some are more mundane like mine was pretty I was coasting, let's say, and so I'm like a turtle in the way that I process things. And so I like to smooth out that, let's say, instead of smashing all that energy into a short packet, kind of
Hmm.
like an out of body or like some psychedelic trip where you're getting all the information in a few hours. That's a big shock. It's kind of like getting electrocuted, and so that's why when we come out of it, we're like, what was that? I got jolted by a large amount of electricity, and I don't know how to just walk that off. And so it can really change people's direction in a way. And for me, I think my higher self and my purpose here was supposed to formulate this sort of stuff, especially the spiritual principles, and try to bring in as much physics as I can, and try to bridge those two worlds, because that's basically what my theory is trying to be. It's trying to be a bridge between the spiritual and the physical, the religious and the scientific. And I know plenty of people are doing that, and we've been doing it for thousands of years. The way that I'm doing it is a little different in terms of what I'm bringing in and what I'm not excluding, because everyone has an exclusion. um, and that's what I found in this. And I wanted to try and make a totally inclusive theory that
Hmm.
literally you can challenge it with anything. And I invite anyone to ask me, like, what about this? What about that? And it will fit in there. It may not be included writing it, because there are limitations with how much I can write and everything, and I don't know everything. But the template, I believe, is all inclusive. The template, kind of like everyone's life and everyone's awakening journey. No one wants to hear, like, no, you didn't have yours. Yours isn't righteous. Yours isn't justified. Yours has no reason. It has no purpose. That's the most depressing thing anyone can hear, especially when it's happening to us. And it's also something more mystical or something mind blowing. That's the last thing we want to hear, is like, nah, that's kind of worthless.
Hmm.
So there has to be a way, if this universe is totally infinite, there has to be a way to explain everything so that everything is included, as though everything has a meaning, everything has a purpose, and it just as much good that everything has a reason. There also has to be just as much bad for everything bad has to have a reason as well. And I know that's
Hmm.
extreme, because we all know there's some really extreme things happening on this planet. We don't like talking about it. It gets, pretty heavy on the heart, and I still believe that there are reasons for it, and it's not wasted, and it's not to punish people. I believe that there is this cosmic lesson, and there's a mechanism for soul growth and lessons. And so that's, we can talk about that later on, but yeah, so in terms of everyone awakening, everyone has a different style, because I've talked with a lot of people that love the cosmic stuff. Some people learn through information, some people learn through direct experience without information, and everyone in between, so we have a nice spectrum, or a bell curve, of how everyone experiences things. And so there's a spectrum, or a gradient, of how people experience their awakening. For me, it was a gradual informational awareness. So I was doing a lot of research and trying to play the pieces together in my mind, versus having a direct out of body experience, or a channeling from an extraterrestrial, some sort of encounter. I didn't have any of that, and I still haven't had any of that on a conscious level. So I think
Okay.
it was supposed to happen that way for what I'm trying to do in my life. That's basically what I'm trying to say.
I love that. Okay, so I want to ask a specific question. So the theory has been huge for you. That is really what has come through and kind of led you into all of these different experiences with your mission. When do you remember, like, when this theory started to come through? Like, do you remember a moment, a time? Like, what?
100%.
Tell us what happened. Like, I want to be there with you.
All right, let's go. let's take the trip.
Let's go.
Yeah, because actually this is super important, and you've seen a lot of my posts and what I talk about, which is love. And even though it's hard to fully embody at all times, there's some things we just naturally want to hate and misunderstand, and kind of condemn in ways. But so I started learning more intense information, conspiratorial information, conspiracy theory, ancient alien theory, back in 2010. So I just graduated college. And that's when I started learning, because everything before 2010 was when I graduated. I was like 23. I don't remember much of my life before then. I probably remember a total of 5 hours of my total life before 23.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. Like, I was just thinking about it, because I just reconnected with a high school friend, and that's what I was telling him, because I hadn't seen him since high school. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like I remember so little of what I said to people, how I said it. All I remember just snippets of how they made me feel, and that was about it. And so yeah, my memory was like offline, and I had no idea what mindfulness was. But basically, so 2010, I start learning some really crazy ancient alien theory that was filling in a lot of religious blanks, in terms of our history, the human history, why religion seems so messy, conventional religion, especially Western religion. It's very messy, Is it all metaphors? Is it actual recount of history? What is it? Because it could go either way, and it creates so much war trying to figure it out, and to have a reasonable explanation for something like that. And obviously it's governing a lot of our society and the way that we function, in terms of, like how we go about our lives. And so I had a huge problem with that all my life. I do remember that all my life. And I remember around second grade was when I started really questioning the established narrative, and just like, well, where did these things come from? Like, how did they actually come into place? Did God really snap his fingers in 7 days, and and then that was it? Is the earth really 6,000 years old? Blah blah blah. Is he really a guy sitting up in the sky? Now that I know what space is, they're telling us there's a thing in space, and there are other stars and stuff, and it's like, well, why did he choose this one? And are we really the center of the universe and everything, given how big it is? And so, it's just hard to really reconcile those two things around like second grade, when I started learning more of the nature of physics in some sense, as an elementary student. But But I was just like, these things aren't matching up, and so I'm asking questions. Not I'm because they're telling me this is reality. They're telling me these things as though they're fact, in Sunday school and church and everything. And I'm, as a second grader, I'm just like, okay, well, this is reality then. These big adults that know way more than me are kind of gods to me, and they're telling me these things are facts. And so I'm trying to truly understand my reality that I'm living in, because I have to navigate it every day. And I'm like, these stories aren't adding up, so we're going to have to do something about this. So I started asking questions, eventually started getting blocks where these authorities were saying, well, you just got to have faith. There are some things you just can't know. And I was like, oh my God, that's getting frustrating. You just can't know. That's just not our place, and you just have to let it go. And I was like, I don't think I can. And so I held,
Bullshit.
yeah, exactly. Thank you for swearing. I wanted to swear like 5 times already. And so yeah, I couldn't let that go. And I've been, questioning things, but then 2010 comes around. I see this ancient alien theory. I'm like, this is filling in some blanks, replace God, Satan, angels, and demons with extraterrestrials. And this just turns into exopolitics. It just turns into some other people that we're unaware of, on a mainstream level, that are just fighting over resources and over some power. And that's why God has a human personality in a way. And that's, that could be how virgin births were made, because of artificial insemination using some technology that we currently do today, and it's a normal thing, and we don't bat an eye about it and saying like you were born of a virgin. But that's basically the same sort of principles. And I'm like, wow, so it's just us at a more advanced level. And so this is what brought me online. So this is basically the kind of information that started allowing me to kind of feel like, okay, so it's not all messy, and there is something clean. There's a clean way to kind of reconcile these more cosmic principles, something well beyond our mainstream society of like, who's the best football player, what actor made how much money, what reality TV shows there are, because that was the most depressing part about my life. And learning about how long Earth has been around, 4.5 billion years, how long it's supposed to be around, our star that we're orbiting, even multiverses. And then I look around and I'm like, this is what we're doing with it.
Keeping up with
And
the Kardashians.
yeah, keeping up with the Kardashians. I legit wanted to kill myself. This was in 2009. I was sitting there watching this.
So how old were you?
I think I was like
About
22 or 23, and I remember just watching it. There's no conspiracy theory. It was just all information about the cosmos, kind of like a full snapshot in 2 hours. And I hadn't seen something like that. And I just remember it finished, the documentary finished, and I was just sitting there, just like, it's worthless. All of this, every pain that I'm having to go through doing jobs and dealing with people's drama about like, you're in my parking space, and scratching the side of the car with their keys because I'm in their parking space, and all of this stuff. I was just like, this is so worthless. It's pointless. And I legit thought like, I got some big knives in the kitchen. Just do it. That was my first true suicidal thought on a conscious
wow.
level, completely sober. I was like, there's no point, and it's probably better that I don't go through this. And maybe I'm the one that's realizing it and in making the best choice, which is to kill myself. Obviously, didn't do it. But that has come up several times after that too, because learn the next heavier thing in terms of like extraterrestrials, and it's all dark, it's all controlling, it's we're a farm, humans are livestock for them, we're their food. That's super depressing too, so I'm like, there's no way out, because conspiracy theory doesn't give you a way out. They load you up with 98% darkness, and then in the
Yep.
end they go, but it's all us, it's the community that's going to get us out. All right, have fun, and then boom, it's over. And I was like, what do I do? I'm Joe Schmo. I'm 23, 24. Like, how do I legit get out of this? And so, wanted to do the same thing. Literally was standing over a knife on the counter, just like, no one's here. I could just, bleed out. No big deal. I know this is kind of intense, but it's, I believe that this is a natural thing for people,
This is
especially
real
with,
shit. This is when
yeah,
people wake up, it's like,
yeah,
F,
it's,
right?
yeah, like, what do I do? And so around 25, so they're about 2 years from there, I was just doing a ton of research every day, probably about 6 to 8 hours of the heaviest things I could find. There was no like, okay, that's too much. I legit said whatever it was, the craziest thing I could find that wasn't banned or censored. And if it was, I would try to find a way to get access to it, because I wanted to know everything. Because I believe that that's the best way anyone can navigate, is to be the most informed, and if we're informed with anything, no matter how far out it is, we can have the most well-rounded and spherical um kind of perception, because in terms of circles and spheres, spinning in space, which is rotation, which everything does, if you have a bias, that creates an ellipse, and that ellipse creates drag in space, and that drag creates resistance and friction, and so it slows it down, and it's actually harder for it to spin and rotate. So, on a conceptual, or I mean a physical level, if I have an even distribution of information as a bubble, as a sphere, it has
Hmm.
the least amount of drag, and so it can
Right.
spin faster and raise my vibration, if you want to take it that way. So
Hmm.
so the way to have that kind of consciousness is to be the most well-rounded, which means I have to have the least amount of bias possible in order for my consciousness to spin with the least amount of resistance and least amount of drag and least amount of heat being generated in space-time. And so that was
Yeah.
my, kind of philosophy for why I wanted
Just get
everything.
in there, learn it all.
Yeah, so I can make the
Okay.
most spherical and well-rounded consciousness and perception
Hmm.
about all of this.
May I share feminine, intuitive perspective here? I love this. This is why I love talking to you. I love what you say about having that well-rounded experience. And, everyone has a different mission, right? And so, with where you're coming from, which I feel is like, I feel super Andromedan energy from you. It's like
Close.
this
I've
computer
been
going, boop,
told
boop,
it's
boop, boop, boop.
Arcturian.
Real well, I feel Andromedan. That's what my
Nice.
intuition tells me. But anyway, so when you talk about having the well-rounded experience and like how much do I need to know, I feel like it has so much to do with like what is your mission, as an individual. Like everybody's mission is different. And so what I find for myself is that there's a certain amount of that information that I can take in, and then it's like, whoop, pump the brakes. Like,
Yeah.
no, not going, like, absolutely not going there. And our role in life, too, I feel has a lot to do with that. Like, I, as a mother, I have gone down the rabbit hole because I do want to know on some level what is going on in those realms. And you know what I'm talking about. Uh, but then my experience there too, as an intuitive person and really feeling the feelings and having those kind of mystical, kind of crazy ass experiences sometimes in those realms, is I've actually had an experience where I have gone into meditation and actually worked with the energy of the children who are being affected on that level and helped
Mm,
in some way to call a piece of them back. And
yes.
that was like deep and heavy. And I was like, okay, now I'm going to step out of this for a while because in order for me to keep evolving and doing my work, like I can't know all of it. It
Absolutely.
would shut me down.
Totally. I love that you're saying that, because I look at it like driving a car. How many people know how to build a car? And so a lot of people like driving, and we do all sorts of things with cars. There's some commercial drivers barely even know how to drive the car. They're hitting curbs and stuff and blowing hubcaps and putting mixed gasoline in the fuel tank and everything. And so it's, it's an experience. They're still doing it. But then you have like engineers that, they're looking at the nuts and bolts and everything, and it would be overload for everyone else to know that. But that's their dedication to it, because they're like, I want to make this driving experience good for everyone else. But sure, they're also not a NASCAR driver. They don't know how to drive at high levels like that. And so you have all these different realms of just the driving experience, let's say the transportation experience, and everyone's supposed to play their own particular role. And I think that if I had crazy, sensitive, mystical experiences, I would never have written this theory. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to be able to teach people. So I wanted to be able to have context for all of our arguments, because it's really hard to argue with reason. If you have a reason and an explanation and it connects to all these other points, and it's not harebrained and far out and all of that and disconnected, then that's what I appreciate in arguments and debates and conflicts, because I saw that in relationships. That if I knew what I wanted in a moment, if I'm with so this can kind of loop back to the start of the theory, like what birthed it, which was love. I actually got into a relationship right when I was coming out of the darkness of the conspiracy theory around 2012. So August 2012, that summer, I was hitting a breaking point of just throwing my hands up. That was the suicidal moment of, there's no hope for me. I at least won't be able to make it in this society the way it's set up. And I realized that, like, the way that I see things and what I want out of the world is not what society is giving me. And I had a feeling back in high school, before I was aware of any of this, which is why I wanted to drink and smoke weed, watch porn, try to bang girls and everything, do the whole shebang of just what guys would be doing. But that was the feeling I was hiding, was I knew that there was something way deeper and more cosmic about reality. I just had no idea where it was. I had no idea. No one knew about it. No one around me could even say, hey man, there's actually something beyond this, but you got to clean up all that shit, in order for you to get to it. I didn't know that. And so it was just a slow, gradual exploration of these things. I started realizing, well, once I stopped watching movies, this started opening up my mind. Once I stopped eating fast food, this started opening up my mind in some ways. And so I started touching little bits, and it started opening up my mind. And then the last one before this 2012, relationship in August, was looking at women as sexual objects. I knew that I needed to really change that. I knew that anytime I talked with a girl, it was because I was trying to have sex with her. And if I didn't feel a sexual attraction, I literally would just turn around and I would just walk away. That was the only reason why I would ever want to talk to a girl. I knew that. And I was like, you don't talk to a single girl just to be friends with her, just to ask her how she's doing and truly care. And I started doing that for 1 week. and then the next weekend, I ended up meeting this girl, the love of my life, the best relationship I ever had in my life, in terms of the most holistic and connected and empathetic and kind of soul awakening relationship. And I felt in love every single day from day one. And she was the same way. There wasn't anyone chasing anyone. It was totally, let's say it was 48-52 in terms of the ratio split of power dynamics, who's chasing who. We were both evenly chasing each other by that 48-52 split ratio. It wasn't 90-10. It wasn't like I was always calling her and she was always waiting for me. It wasn't like I was always making the decisions and she was just hoping I would always make the right decisions, knowing that it should be what she wanted at all times and everything. There was not this typical imbalance of masculine and feminine. I felt like I could open up my feelings just as much as I could command, this intellectual control of the masculine. and she could do the same thing. She was getting her PhD in psychology. I loved that, that she was, into the kind of processing of information, the heavier loads of processing of information versus being a sensitive person and only sensitive to where, she couldn't talk about anything. She couldn't formulate anything. So I love that. But she also expressed her emotions. We got into some conflicts, and in the way that we went about it was the best thing ever. And it's what woke me up to empathy, the concept of what a relationship is, truly is at a fundamental level, which is the exchange of oneself, not the act of getting something, to possess something of, well, I'm not getting my needs met, and I'm trying to convince you to give that to me because I deserve that, without realizing that I'm taking something from her and that she's gonna, be drained at some level. So that was what, built this whole win-win scenario of we're both trying to win in this. And we have to really get creative in order to see what would be a win-win situation. And it forced me to get out of myself and to be in her position, which I'm trying to argue against her position. And so I actually had to then say, well, now I love you genuinely. So that means I have to love this position that I'm actually trying to destroy initially, because that's what an argument is trying to destroy the other side of, no, 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 no. What you did was wrong and what I did was right. And I'm going to try to argue why I'm right and why you're wrong. And that's most people's conflicts in relationships. And I think that's why they suck, to be honest. That's why it's so depressing seeing like couples, especially long-term couples, you just see the depression on their face when they have to do stuff together, and just like they just can't connect. And for me, it was the opposite. I actually wanted to connect with the thing I was hating in this moment, which was her perspective and what she wanted out of life. And I had to put my feet in those shoes and not just walk a mile and go, this fucking sucks. I don't like these shoes, because that's what people think when they say walk a mile in their shoes. That's not the full length of empathy. You have to put yourself in their shoes, take a look around, walk an actual mile, and then say, and this is all I know. I don't know anything else. So I have to appreciate this mile walk that I'm taking in this moment, and as though it's mine, as though I have no other option. And that's when I started loving whatever it was that I was arguing and trying to destroy. And that was the most magical thing ever. And that was, I'm sure plenty of people already understand this, but for me, that was my first time of taking my mind outside of the peering out into life of just what can I grab. It was more of her being a reflection, and I started trying to put my consciousness in hers, and then go, what does this moron look like right now, trying to argue this point. And so that's when I started really feeling for her. And then our arguments were only one day, and we would do it once every 4 months. We would argue about something. We would go through this for one day, and then it was amazing after that. It wasn't suppressing and then turning away until we forget about it, and hoping that it just kind of evens out. And so we got stronger every single time, and I'm like, this is the most beautiful thing ever. And so basically, after a few months of being with her, I started really processing all this heavy information that I was learning about the cosmos, not just conspiracy theory, not just ancient alien theory, because conspiracy theory turned into ancient alien theory, or sorry, ancient alien theory turned into conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theory turned into crazy far out technology. Far out technology turned into quantum physics. Quantum physics turned into metaphysics. Metaphysics turned into spirituality, which is kind of emotionality in a way, the relationship side of things, of just who am I, life purpose, the meaning of my life and everything. So they all kind of, played into the next. And so it was one thing after another. And I started hitting that spiritual point getting into like Greg Braden type lectures and everything. He still does some technology and everything, but a lot of it is who am I in this world? And that was around 2012. So, and that was when I met her, and she opened up this whole unconditional love. Like, what is it to truly give myself to someone without saying I need this in return? Every gift I gave her, almost every gift, I did not need it in return. And that was so crazy unique for me. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I have a question about that. So when you went into this relationship, committed to this relationship, and do you have any conscious awareness of what that connection with her did for your kind of awakening experience, as far as with what you were moving into your theory about? Did you like feel, I mean,
Yeah.
unconditional love, wow, like that's going to open
It's
up some
massive.
realms to you, right?
That's
Like
my
it's
psychedelic trip.
huge.
You know, when people
Ah,
ask, yeah, when people ask, like, you know, you have contacts with extraterrestrials, interdimensional beings. Do you have an out of body? Did you eat a ton of mushrooms? You know, do ayahuasca? What was it? And I was like, I fell in love. That was my psychedelic trip. It was the most mind blowing thing, sober too. I did not care to do this. Is also a key point. I was drinking, smoking, watching porn every night, masturbating every night, you know, the whole bit of just what makes a simp, you know, a simp guy in a way. And I could still make it, you know, like make my lifestyle function in terms of working out every day and, you know, showing up to a job and everything, but having all those distortions actually really contracts the mind, you know? So if I have to still show up to normal life functions of working out every day, and then, you know, showing up to a general job, it wasn't anything pressuring or anything crazy, high profile, anything. But I started seeing that if I'm going to consume these sort of distortions and contractions of consciousness, even though I may think that it expands my mind, you know, plenty of people think things expand their mind or helps with that. I actually believe it still creates a kind of contraction and a hole in consciousness that will have to be filled in once we sober up from it. Because once we sober up from it, we will then get triggered. We will get some sort of flag, and that will be an indicator that we have a hole and that we have a bias and we have a blinder, which, like I said, with the spherical consciousness, it will create drag. That drag is a trigger, you know. And so this is the physics of consciousness. It's not consciousness being separate of physics. That's basically the premise of my theory, is to show that consciousness is literally physics itself. They're not one preceding the other, one influencing the other in some unidirectional linear pathway. It goes both ways. It's alternating current in terms of the philosophy. And this is how the physics of consciousness works. And so when we have these biased minds, they actually create more elongated elliptical consciousnesses. And if they spin, because everything spins, you know, nothing is truly stationary. Sorry, flat earthers. So nothing is truly stationary in that sense. And so the more biased and distorted mind we have, the more elongated it gets. And then it creates more heat, more resistance, more friction. And those are experienced as triggers because the consciousness can't flow evenly compared to when we have an even flow in all directions, because then you don't get triggered because you're like, I get it. I see it. And I don't have any protrusions of my consciousness where I have these peaks, because if you have a peak, there will naturally have to be a valley to counterbalance it. That's the
mm.
waveform.
So like flow state is
So
like, would consider that a flow state?
I would consider that flow state because like, you know, in terms of the qualities of mind, when people are in flow state, what do they typically see? You know, they see all things kind of evenly, unbiasedly. You know, they don't say, you know, like if it's let's say they're an athlete. I play semi-pro racquetball, still currently up to the day, but started around 2012 when I hit that level. And that's when I started really expanding my consciousness. And actually, it was really cool. I played state singles 2012, played this guy, always smashes me and everything, but I was meditating every morning for that year. And it was like an hour-long meditation, super deep breathing, really slow, like 10-second breaths, and doing that for an hour and then moving your attention around the body. So I go to play the state singles tournament. First round, for some random reason, I was like, I'm going to do my meditation while I play on the court. I'm going to do the deep breathing, the 10-second breath. Obviously, I'm not counting, but the goal is to breathe in as slowly as possible and breathe out as slowly as possible, which means you have to actually control your breath. You can't just breathe it in. And because when we breathe in really quick, like the Wim Hof breathing, we can actually just force our body to without actually being aware of the movement in and the movement out. And so when you breathe as slowly as possible, you actually have to increase the frame rate of your consciousness so that it flickers faster, kind of like HD TV, 4K video, 8K video compared to, 360, 480, 720p video. The frame rates are slower, like 12 frames per second, 24 frames, 30 frames, 60 frames, 120 frames per second. And you can see the difference in that video quality playback when you're watching it, because if it's 12 frames per second, you can almost see the flicker of each picture because they're just pictures. And those pictures are snapshots, which would be called a memory. A picture says 1,000 words, but a video says 1,000,000 pictures, right? Because that's what a video is. A 2-hour video is just like 1,000,000 pictures being played. So our consciousness is the same way. Our consciousness is like a strobe light, that spin rate that I was talking about. We have the shape of it, but it also flickers. And that spin is like a strobe light. And so when you have a pulsation or a spin of that memory, not to get into like the holographic animation, like kind of a standing wave type thing in quantum theory of just like, this whole universe is a standing waveform of vibration. And that's what we call the hologram. And that's why we see things so steadily, but it's flickering in and out of existence. And dare I say multiverses, so that's basically the in-between is where it's filling in with all the other multiverses. So our frame rate of conscious, and thank you for letting me go out. This is like really fun for me to just be able to.
I'm going to stop you in a second because I want to ask some questions. Keep going.
So basically what I wanted, I started realizing before this tournament that my frame rate of consciousness is what allows me to see reality in high definition, which is what allows me to see more of my environment and then navigate more of it. And so I think that was my intuition to try and do the deep breathing without really knowing exactly why. I just had that feeling. And so I started doing the long breaths. And usually when athletes play, when they make their jolting movement of like hitting the ball. So for me, it's, a racket hitting a ball. You exert yourself. And usually that exertion is when people want to exhale. And then in between, they'll take in their breath. And then boom, it's a quick exhalation. But I tried to tell myself that my breath was the most important thing. The frequency of my breath was actually the thing I was trying to play in that whole match. And so my challenge to myself was, don't think about anything of that game or of that match, because we played 3 games. We played a tiebreak. It was a 6 tiebreak too, 11-10 tiebreaker. And so my challenge to myself was to make the most consistent breath possible. 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, to make a 10-second total frequency breath. And so that was my challenge to myself. And I told myself, no matter when you're hitting and when you're receiving, or when you're lunging for, those really stretched out shots, that's usually another time when we exhale. I told myself I don't want my breath to be choppy based on those movements, because they're all different frequencies. All those movements are going to happen at different points, and it's not going to be smooth and continuous. And so I wanted my breath to be the most continuous thing, and everything else would be, whatever frequency they're at. So if I'm hitting the ball, but I'm in my up breath, am I breathing in? I was going to say I'm still going to hit the ball as I'm breathing in slowly. So I'm still putting my attention on my breath more than I am, hitting the ball and exhaling like that. And that was super mind bending. And that really expanded my mind and just accelerated my skill level from then on. I was like at a competitive semi-pro level from that point, and it was an out of body experience in a way. And so
Yeah. So did you continue as you were doing so well and, getting so good at this? Did you continue to did you carry that into the
yeah,
next
so
games, that breath technique?
I had a tournament, that tournament April 2012, played another tournament June 2012, and then played another tournament. I was going to leave this part out. In August, it was the day I met the love of my life, my soulmate at that time. I was in a super blissful mood for whatever reason. And I was going to a tournament with a couple of my friends. So this was like August 8th, maybe. And 8/8. Awesome. And so 8/8/2012. And so we were going to a tournament, and I just remember I was blissing out the entire drive up. It was about 3 hour drive in the morning. Picked up my friends, and I was blissing out the entire time. Just like they couldn't say anything wrong, whatever they said, I was just smiling, literally just tripping out off of nothing. Seemingly, I didn't know, and then go do the tournament. And then this was a round robin tournament, so you had to play everyone in your division, and so it was like 6 matches, and I played this guy that was ranked like 300 in the nation, 300 out of like 25,000 people we had ranked in racquetball in the system. So high ranking player. I run through everyone else and literally playing out of my mind to where these players are literally like, what did you smoke? Like, what are you on right now? And I'm just like, I don't know. And I just kept playing, and I just nothing affecting me, but not blocking out emotion. You know how people are like, nothing affects me, I'm like a stone wall. Like, that to me is the broken masculine of numbness. And so I was totally opposite. I was feeling everything, but also not being overwhelmed by it. Like the feminine super sensitive, but feel, can't do anything. It's almost paralyzing the more sensitive we get. And so I was super sensitive to everything happening, but also unaffected by it. It was the best um, dual state I could be in. And then I end up playing that 300 ranking guy of 300 in the nation, and literally beat him in the best match, not the best match, because that first match I told you about was my best match of my life. Absolutely. It was incredible. But I ended up beating this guy. I'm on cloud nine. Had no idea what happened, because I thought he was supposed to beat me. And then we drive home with my friends, and then go out with my friends to celebrate. I meet this girl as we're out, and she walked in, spotlight on her, everything else blacked out, the whole deal. I'm like, I need to talk to this girl, but I was so afraid because she was like a Barbie doll and just loved the way she carried herself. And I'm like, there's no way she'd be interested in me. But she kept looking at me across. We were at a bar restaurant, and she kept looking at me. And I tried to do this thing for some time before that, where anyone that I connected eyes with, no matter how much I knew them or how much I didn't know them, I would try to hold eye contact. I would try to say, can I handle the peering of someone else? Because I'd usually turn away. And I was like, I'm just gonna hold it no matter how awkward it is, no matter, whatever. And I'm just gonna hold it until they turn away. And she, we connected eyes, and I would try to hold it. And then I'd have to, do one of those. And it 3 times that happened. And then once I started talking with her, I asked her about that because I told her that's what I was doing that. And I was like, why did you keep looking over and then holding it? She was like, I was trying to get you to come over and talk to me this whole time. It was like 2 hours. And so I was like, that's awesome. And so, yeah, Cloud9, played that awesome tournament. So yeah, I was increasing my skill level because of this. And those 3 tournaments, I did the breathing the whole time, every match I had for the tournament. So yeah, the first tournament I did it in, made it to the semis, which was pretty good for me. The next tournament made it to the finals, lost in a tiebreak. And then that third tournament won the semi-pro division. And that was my first semi-pro win for a tournament. And then I met her, and then that's kind of when I was like, you're my thing. I'm not doing, I love racquetball. I'm still going to play, but there's, not a lot of money in it. It's hard to make a career out of it. And I'm learning all this awesome far out information. And I met this amazing girl. So I'm not going to give it up for racquetball.
Like flow state. You were in flow state for sure.
Flow state. And it felt like pretty regularly too.
Yeah. I want to stop you for a second and talk about, in practical terms, how one gets to that space, right? Like playing racquetball and really breathing with intention. Like you're very methodical. That's pretty intense. So I want to share an experience with you that's a little bit softer.
Yes.
Which I love. I mean, I love this
Go
about you.
for
I'm
it.
totally celebrating it. I just want to, in practical terms, help people understand, like, how do you achieve that flow state? For those of us who don't play racquetball and don't do it like that, because all you look
That
at
was
these
my
like
thing, but you
top,
can do this to anything.
these top level, high performing athletes, like they're doing the work, right? Like that, like this is a thing now for high level athletes, is they're really doing the work in some way, whether it's breath work, meditation, deep mindset work, a combination of those things. So for me, I found that when I started meditating as an RN, so when I was still working as a nurse, the most profound shift that I found in my work I could not go to work without meditating, because the environment became so just toxic and uncomfortable that I literally wanted to pull my hair out when I was in the hospital. And so I would get up extra early and meditate for at least 30 minutes. Then it turned into at least an hour. And what I found is that in a code situation, when someone was nearly dying, it was like I turned into this fucking superhuman. And the first time it happened, the first time that I was really conscious of being a superhuman in the middle of a code, after the code, the person lived. And I was like the team leader. Like I was leading everyone in the code, because the hospital I was working at, the doctor's round, but there's not a doctor always like right there. Like it's the nurse leading the code. And I stopped afterwards, and we all started to kind of decompress, and you don't really have a conversation or anything. You just go back to your work because there's shit to do and other patients to take care of. You go right back into it. I was back. I was back at baseline. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. My mind wasn't zooming. Like I came back almost immediately, and everyone else was walking around kind of freaked out, shaking. And I was like, oh my God, like that's the power of intentional, consistent work. Whatever feels good to you, whether it's the breath work or the meditation, whatever it is, do it with intention and do it with consistency, and it will change your life, because you put yourself in that flow state. From a physics perspective, right? It's like I'm like, it's like a unified field where
absolutely. But the thing about the unified field though is how do you access it? Sorry, and just let me know, like,
no, I like it.
Time-wise,
we're getting close. We're getting close.
Well, we could. There's some really key things. There's a lot.
I think you should come back. I think you should
absolutely.
come back for sure.
I'm free in 5 minutes after this. We can do part 2. Because I love this, because it's so important for people, and this is why I love this, and I dedicate my life to this. And anytime anyone wants to talk about this, reach out. I love having these conversations because the big question is, what do you have to do to have access to like this unified field that you just said, in that flow state? And in my opinion, it doesn't have to be crazy psychedelic trips. I think those things let us know what's let's say more of reality and everything. But just like anything, the answer is always going to be super simple, almost stupid simple,
Yeah.
and almost unbelievably simple, because that's usually where people throw it out. So if you say it's love, you have to love what you're doing and where you're at. Everyone go, of course, but they'll say it like that. They'll roll their eyes. They'll say, of course it is. But I'm like, then why weren't you happy agreeing with me in that moment? Why didn't you smile when I said it's love? Why did you toss it aside and say, of course, but there's more to it? And that's what I want to know. There's more to it. And I'm like, okay, but don't deny that it's not both. Don't deny that it's only one. It's a complex answer and not something as simple as loving. So if you love that person, that stranger, because you're a very loving person, you give yourself in that moment. I don't see you as, if someone's talking with you, I don't see you as being like, I don't have time for this, and just putting on a fake mask, like how professionals might do. If they don't love their job, they have to put on a fake smile and go, yeah, I'll get right on that for you. That is the distortion in consciousness that creates drag, because it creates let's say, a dynamic and a polarity between the inner and the outer self. So we're always going to have polarity. We're always going to have duality. That difference in dynamic between the inner and the outer self is what's going to determine the pressure differential between polarity. And that pressure differential is what creates frequency, because a frequency is actually just a ratio between positive and negative. Everything is a ratio in this universe. So people say it's all frequency, or first people think it's all energy. And I'm like, yes, but there's something right behind that, or something better to explain it, which is frequency. Because energy is all sorts of different mediums and expressions. You can say anything's really energy, and they're all kind of different, right? So energy, yes, it's true, but there are a lot of different versions of energy. So you can then say, well, maybe something more specific or precise would be frequency, because it's all a frequency. And because that's just number. That frequency is really just a number. It's just the number of oscillations with a number of wavelengths within one period of time, which we call second, which could be, there could be a cool mind trip, because the second is really a human construct. So we can start changing the frequencies. So there's no real prime frequency, like love is a frequency. It's 432 or 528 or 369 or whatever. That's actually only based on what we think is 1 second, which is actually a human construct in a way. You can make a second anything you want. So you can actually then change the parameters or the boundary conditions, which then changes the frequency. So then numbers are literally infinite. So then there's no real prime frequency for love. Sorry to bust the bubble for some people, because I've heard that plenty of times. But this is the fun, playing with physics. And so frequency is right behind energy, but then right behind frequency it's actually ratio, because that's how you make a vortex, like a tornado. You have a tornado, you actually have to have a pressure differential between atmospheric pressures or temperature in order to create a vortex, which is a spinning spiral of energy. That's how things animate. So it animates on pressure differentials. And when we don't understand that's the case, then we don't understand duality. We don't understand polarity, the pushing and pulling of life. And then it's harder to, see what's happening. So I love talking, and that's basically, what is energy. And so that's how we connect with, let's say, the unified field, is that we're trying to connect with energy, and we're trying to feel all these different pressure differentials of pushing and pulling. And if we're not in love with that moment, we lose the insight for all of these pressure differentials that allows you to be the most optimal in that moment as possible. So if you lost your love for that moment in that person of, saving their life, you would lose the insight to all those dynamics at play that would actually make you more incapable of helping this person. And so your stability and your your love for that person is what creates the stability in that flow state, to where all these different dynamics or pressure differentials or variables that you have to balance, they all even out, and it's spherical. It's almost like you have access to all of them evenly. There's not one that's farther away than another. You're almost like in the center of of that bubble, that energy bubble. Like you're in the center of that universe between you and that other person, because you're creating a polarity between you and that
Okay.
person.
Okay. So
So it's love.
I
That's
want
all
to,
I'm saying.
yeah. Okay.
It's love.
So I want to understand what you're saying as far as, so what I'm seeing is like when I was in love with my ex-husband, right? Like when I was in the relationship, when I was in love with him, I mean, I was always subconsciously looking for ways to like balance out, like, and like see the best in him, right? There was a point in time where I was always seeing the best in him. Then when we weren't together anymore, when we got divorced, and when he was pissing me off and triggered me all the time, I was more pissed off and more triggered, because like that love, it didn't go away completely, but I was not in love with him, right? Like it had shifted. And so my experience with him and what I was looking for in him was very different, right? Now, that's from a very 3D perspective, because then, so I'm trying to like bridge the quantum physics and like the everyday
this
reality,
is what I
right?
do with
Okay,
people in
so
mentoring, is I'm trying to apply physics to something
right,
that's more emotional.
right. And so, and this is the shift, is whether you're into physics or not, when you become the observer of your reality, you are engaging with these principles on some
Physics, you're
level.
literally changing physics. This
Exactly.
is mind to matter
Exactly.
type, mechanisms.
Right. And so when I look back at my behavior with him and the reality that I was creating with him, which was very chaotic, it was very chaotic. It was a lot of peaks and valleys. And then when I would move myself into a space where it was like, okay, something needs to change. And what needs to change is me. And so how in my changing myself am I going to shift the world around me? And I start saying, observing my behavior and going, okay, if I do this, that happens over there. And like taking my power back. And because of that evolution, our relationship is fucking completely different. Like we have so much peace between us. And two, then when I really take responsibility for my own behavior, I was even able to access another level of love for him, as
Beyond,
opposed
you
to,
were kind of getting into another like orbital shell, like you were getting in a higher perspective, almost like a
yeah,
higher self. Like you're seeing the unification between the two dynamic expressions, which
yeah,
I believe is the fourth dimensional self, because that's like,
yeah.
yeah,
And
without
when you
getting
were
into,
talking about too in the beginning of the podcast, when you were going deep into all of the like bad things going on in the world, and you talked about like there's a reason for the good, there's a reason for the bad, like there's a purpose
and
here,
it
and when we can,
connects at this higher
yes,
place.
exactly. And so, I mean, Jim, he's my greatest teacher. He has
Right?
taught me so much until I didn't really need him as a teacher anymore. And
Yeah.
so now, or he's teaching me in a different way, right? Like it's not through trauma and pain, it's through
Yes.
love. It's through love and kindness and peace.
And it still could be through trauma, but I think it's you, like you said, you did the work. And
Yep.
so you changed it to where I would say you changed your pressure differential between your masculine, feminine, your positive, your negative polarities in yourself. Because
Yep.
in order to have an energy field, we have to have kind of like a dielectric, a magnetic dipole. Because you can't have just one polarity. You can't just have masculine and no feminine. We always have that in order to create a fully connected toroidal field. To have one singular toroidal field, you always have to have two polarities. That's why I love balancing out my masculine and feminine, because the more masculine I am without my feminine, so if I have a 90% masculinity and a 10% femininity, I'm now dependent on my 90% feminine partner and her 10% masculinity, which she's now dependent on my 90% masculinity. And of course, we have to fill in the blanks as to what is masculine and feminine characteristics, because those are the things that we fight over in life. You know, you're thinking too much. You're trying to coach me too much. I just need a partner to listen. I don't need you to solve anything. It's like, that's the masculine and feminine. Masculine wants to be a coach and wants to solve things, be analytical, intellectual, reasonable. The feminine doesn't want to solve things, lets things be, you know, just hold space, you know, just feel it. Don't analyze it and don't judge it, and completely opposite. But you need both together. Not one is going to be better than the other. And so when you change those, the balance point of those polarities within yourself, you change your pressure differential, which changes your tornado, your spin, your energetic field. And that's why people say, I just can't connect with the same people anymore. And it's purely because of physics. It's because you change the pressure differential between your dynamic or your polarity of your masculine and feminine, your positive, your negative, what, you know, like whatever labels we want to put on it. It's the duality of equal and opposites. It's the yin yang. And changing that balance point is what changes the, let's say, the center. And that's what changes the resonant frequency of that system or that tornado that is your energy field. And so that's why people are, you know, they don't resonate with the same people anymore. People treat them differently once they change their mind. And what do you know? When they changed their mind, all they did was change the pressure differentials of not as much this and not enough that. Now they're like, I actually see them almost being the same thing. And I'm like, yeah, that's the unification. That is the overlap. That is getting to this unified mind in a way. But people do it with only certain things and not other things. There are other things where they still have a crazy divide, crazy imbalance. And so then they still find themselves being triggered, being caught outside themselves, blaming other people. Because when we put the blame on someone else, all we're doing is creating more of that split and that divide. And that's what's distorting our energy. And that's why we're always going to find these people, because we have a break in our energy that can only be completed by our equal and opposite resonant frequency. That is why we attract the people that we do. That is why we connect with the people that we do. And there's nothing magical about it. Sorry, guys. It's literally just physics. It's literally just playing around. And like I said,
well, physics is magical.
It is. It is, because like when we do see these things change, it does create that feeling. But that feeling is actually the pressure differential of this new balance point. That is what a feeling is. When we have a new balance point of these pressure differentials of emotionality or mindset or whatever you want to call it, something completely intangible, space-time, even the fabric of space-time, because that's all it is the torsion of space, the fabric of space-time. That's what these vortices are made of. That's what our ether energy is. So all we're doing in feeling things and having this new feeling is all we've done is just created a new balance point between these pressure differentials. And that's, you know, that's all life is we're connecting with people to create a feeling. And notice that when we don't change and they don't change, there's no feeling. That's why it's almost dead inside, because it's so normal. And when we experience things, when we change our mind about things and change our minds about the balance points of all these things of, is this good or is it bad? Is this bad or is it good? And then we go, I actually think they're actually the same thing. Like all my successes and all my losses are actually the same thing. When I started realizing, nice, yay, celebration.
What the hell is that?
I don't know if you clicked. I didn't click anything.
I did not. I clicked mute. That's all I hit. Okay, let me just, and see, that's the magic, Jack. There's the magic, the balloons right there.
Literally changing the software.
I had one other guest, like at the very beginning of doing my podcast, who this happened to.
Oh,
She
nice.
had the balloons, but she said it was on her end. It was her device. She said, all
I
day
didn't
long, I've
touch
been
a
having these
thing
balloons. I think that's just the magic coming
all
through. That
day
was fucking
long.
awesome.
Well,
I love
it's
that.
a key point because it all kind of comes down to, like tying it back into the theory. That's what I realized back in 2012, being in that relationship, is this is the physics. It hit me in April
Yeah.
2013. I was sitting there. I remember I was at work, I was at my day job, and I was just sitting there like this. And all of this made sense in terms of this is what I was doing with my partner. I was sorting out these pressure differentials. And then I was also realizing that's just physics. That's all any physics is doing, is literally sorting out some sort of duality. Even if it's, atmospheric pressures, if it's particle charge, if it's antimatter, multiple or parallel realities, parallel universes, it's literally all duality. It's all duality, and they all have a slight difference. I guarantee you'll never find any physics that will say it's equal and opposite. Even though we generalize, they'll always say, but really, this one's a little bit different than that one. And we actually have to have that difference in order to create reality, to have it exist. As you know, if a patient is flatlined, they're dead. They're non-existent. So to have anything truly completely flat, it's non-existent. And so you have to have a slight difference, an offset, a slight offset. So then we can get into some really cool stuff about this particular universe that we're in. Is actually the offset is phi. It's actually the golden ratio, 1 to 0.618. And so that's the offset. And that actually is the divine spacing. That's how all this stuff seems to work the way it does. Everything is built around phi. And this kind of connects with my device, in terms of the principles. Everything is, I tried to center as much about this resonance therapy device in phi as I can, so that it's as natural as possible. Even though we're using it indoors, it's a desktop type thing. You can use it outdoors, obviously, but I'm trying to incorporate all of these different principles as to what's happening in life in terms of what we talked about, the physics of relationships, the physics of consciousness, all the principles that we included in this. I've taken that and I've tried to implement that into this resonance therapy device so that we can actually sculpt our consciousness to create something more holistic in our consciousness, more well-rounded and more natural in feel, so that we can clean up our consciousness in ways, and then show up to these sort of dynamics and relationships in, let's say, more well equipped. Because if we're foggy, if I were still eating fast food and still, whacking off the porn and drinking every night and, doing all this stuff that contracts my consciousness, it's harder to see all of these things playing together, which kind of ties into that higher self mind. It's hard to really see how my losses, even though they hurt in the moment, it's hard to see the reason of, where it's leading me, which is usually something good. That higher self, in terms of my successes aren't just, my wins, like anyone. It's just something on the positive side of this duality that meets at some point. There it is.
Oh my gosh, that is awesome. It's awesome. If you're listening and not watching, we've got some wild effects coming in that we don't know where they're coming from, but we're gonna take it and run with it. That is hilarious.
So basically that's, we want to get there. That 4D, 4D, 5D, 6D, whatever D you want to make it. They're all Ds, And so, if you want to say you're 12D or you're 24D or 144D, good. Whatever is the next thing that is, let's say, more unified, and I would say evolve. So this ties into my theory. I call it intelligent evolution, because we have intelligent design that is more religious in nature. And then we have natural selection or evolution, which is more random in nature. It's almost, like things happen accidentally. And I basically tried to bridge it in my theory to show it's intelligent evolution. And the way that things evolve is by evolving the consciousness of that being that is evolving, or the observer. And for us humans, it's humans. For animals, it's animals. Ecosystems to ecosystems. Planets, yes, Gaia, Earth, has consciousness. It is a being that has preferences of, if you do more of this and less of that, I'm going to hurt, and I may talk back. I may say some things back, So we might call it that communication. We may call that the Schumann resonance. Maybe even physically, it's earthquakes, hurricanes and everything. The sun has consciousness. All things are made of the same stuff that spins, it rotates, it has a vibration. You pile enough of those things together, it creates a particular form, but it also has limitations. And that's, the human limitation and everything. But this is how all things are consciousness. So that's how we can connect with all things. That's why some people have like really crazy far out sensitivities. It's just because they haven't limited their perception of what is conscious. And so if they can open their minds up to that, they now inhabit a unified relationship with the mind of that thing. So if they believe that the sun is a living being, they now inhabit a consciousness that can encapsulate the entirety of that relationship. And that's how they can get messages from the sun. And it's not just photons. It's like literally ether communication.
Yeah.
So
it's like water.
Like water. And so when we have cleaner water, especially structured water in certain ways, because, we can put all, just like drinking, smoking, and, porn and movies and fast food and everything, that's dirtier food. It's still food. It's still something we can put in our bodies, and it still makes us feel full. It gives us some calories, some carbs and fats and proteins and stuff. But there's a reason why we start eating more organic food. There's a reason why we start eating more produce and not stuff that comes in bags, And it's for this reason, because they see a difference, and they see a difference in cleaning up their vessel, their antenna, which is the body, to communicate with the environment and the people around, because that's usually how we communicate, is usually through people. It's not like we're tree hugging all day, but you can do that if you want, and you can get messages from the trees, because those are literally hairs. They're hairs, and that's why our hair is like an antenna. So everything counts. It's not just meditation. It's not just microdosing. It's not just water. It's not just resonance therapy devices. It's not just books. It's not just podcasts. Literally put them all together. And if we clean them all up, guaranteed we're going to be seeing different things in terms of the way we show up. We're going to have a normal conversation, maybe even about keeping up with the Kardashians. And we're going to get some higher, deeper etheric message of what's happening in this moment, even as we're talking about something, let's say, a little bit more shallow. Shallow is not bad. Like I said, they're just pressure differentials. Shallow and deep are good. It's good to talk about the weather every once in a while and not always go deep sea diving, because that can hurt all the time. So it's a balance. Both are equally important. And so I can't fully bash the Matrix. I can't fully bash small talk. I can't fully bash any of that. There are some people, it does get hard to always have these kinds of conversations and always be working in this realm. But I do believe we're trying to get to that ET level consciousness, which is why I love this so much, and why I love anything that tries to clean up our consciousness. Because here's the kicker: if we ever want to reincarnate somewhere outside of this zoo, this human zoo that we're living in, if we don't have the capacity to withstand the balance point and the pressure differentials, because like I said, you only use that word to create context for physics of consciousness. But every civilization has a balance point of pressure differentials of good and bad, in and out, acceptable and unacceptable. And we call that culture. And the way that we fit into a culture is by having or following that script, that program, because a program is just binary coding of ones and zeros. That's why we call it a program. That's why Matrix is a program. It's not because there's literally software. Reality is the software, and we're programming it by following these pressure differentials, which create an avenue or a neural network of reality. And that's why if you change that neural pathway in that culture, it hurts. It literally fries the system of us and the people around us, because they're like, what are you doing? You're not flowing in the right neural networks. And those neural networks are only guided by these pressure differentials of in and out, good and bad, better or worse, hierarchies. That is how we code the matrix. And sorry, we'll never get out of matrix, because we'll just end up coding another set of neural networks based on these polarities of in and out, good and
Yeah.
bad.
Well,
And
it's a collective agreement, right? I mean,
it's
a matrix is a collective agreement. We just want the matrix to be different.
exactly. So
It's
we
shifting
can't
the matrix,
destroy the matrix. It's not like
right?
in the movies. All we're doing is trying to change these pressure differentials so that we create a more sustainable, balanced, and holistic matrix. And
Yeah,
so
and
that
it can be painful, or it can be a little bit smoother based on the work that you're doing. I remember when I first started in the online space, and I started like I brought in a lot of money really quickly. It physically hurt my body because there was a pressure difference, right? It was like the way that I was engaging all of my life with the energy of money, or with the frequency
and
of
how you made it and
abundance.
what you had to do to make it. That's
Exact.
super
Well,
important.
it is. Okay, well, okay. And so that's an interesting question, because the way that I made it was way easier than I was used to making it, because I was used to working my ass off
This
as
is
a
a great
nurse.
point.
It came very easily and very quickly, and you know what happened? I got really sick. My
C-
physical body shut down on me. And when I look back at that behavior, I'm like, wow, I was doing a lot of quantum stuff. Like I was doing a lot of meditating, I was doing a lot of astral travel, but I really wasn't connecting with my physical body. And so I had a lot of density, is the way that I'll describe it from my perspective. There was a lot of density within my body, within my nervous system. All of these old frequencies from the past were still there. I wasn't like doing the intense like breath work that I'm doing now, and all of these other tools. Once I started doing those tools to support my physical body, I was able to more easily, and am able to more easily, integrate the shifts in the changes around me, based on like what I want to create, but can my physical vessel accept it with
Yeah.
ease?
100%. Yeah, because you have to be primed for it. And I think, like what else?
Primed. Yep.
Yeah, like in terms of software updates, you have to, there's a certain cutoff point where the software no longer fits the hardware, which is why you have to buy a new computer. And it sucks because you can't like buy a new body unless you're like the elite and you clone yourself. But like in terms of the physics of reality, that's the way things evolve, which is why I call it intelligent evolution. I call my theory intelligent evolution for that reason, because there has to be a way. Things aren't fixed. There has to be a way the literal particles can change their form, not just rearrange themselves, but literally change the structure of the particle itself down at super fundamental levels, so that we can actually evolve and become, we're already beings of light. So we're not getting to beings of light. We currently already are light. It just doesn't look like light because everyone else is vibrating at the same bandwidth of light. And we just call it physical reality, but it's all light. So how do we change the signature or the resonant frequency of that light so that we can encompass more of this bandwidth of light and kind of stretch out into more of the cosmos and be cosmic beings in that way? That was my big motive for writing this theory, because I wanted to try to explain how someone like Jesus or Buddha could do these things and not literally be something intangible, something we can't achieve. It's untouchable, and no one else is going to have the ability to do it. I'm like, if they were human beings before this and they did this, there has to be a way, because we're all human beings too. It's not because there's some specific chosen person and they were the one God that reincarnated here. I'm like, well, we incarnated here too. We're in a human body, and we were carpenters and stuff. And why don't we have access to this? It has to literally be physics that we're all a part of. That's the only way to have a totally unified, all-inclusive model. So I wanted to be able to try to understand and then explain how the physics of ascension would actually work. how this process would actually happen. And this is just what evolution is. And I believe that these people were able to figure out, and not just conceptually like how I'm describing it, but literally embody a different balance point of all these things. That's why Jesus wasn't, he's getting whipped, he was getting spiked, he was getting jabbed, he was getting name called, stoned, everything. And what's the biggest thing why everyone loves him for it? He didn't point a finger at him, and he didn't cut him down and go, just wait till you get yours. Karma's a bitch. It's gonna bite you in your ass. Not one word of that. Why? I think it's because he realized before that moment that it wasn't like he was going to sacrifice himself. I think that he actually knew that's what would happen, of him preaching about what is true unconditional love and how to fully embody that as everyone, not just follow me as your God. I do not believe that's what he was actually saying. I believe that he was claiming to be God, but I believe that he was also saying, and also within you, and I think they cut that part out. That's my personal opinion, is that I think that he said, I am God, and so are you. And then they chop that off, because that's basically the empowerment that they've taken away from his message. And it's basically created a bottleneck of a business model that says, take my one Jesus pill. It's the only one that will save you. And everyone that's buying into it is big pharma in the religious sense. So the real cure is to give that power back and to make it something really simple. Like, big pharma doesn't want us to learn that it's just eat healthy, and we won't have to buy these subscriptions anymore. If we clean up our lifestyles more proactively, we won't need cancer treatments in the back end for hundreds of thousands of dollars when it's too late and it's probably not going to work. And they don't want us to know that. And so what do? They cut out all of that useful information. And I believe that's what religion has done, has done to people like Jesus in particular. He's the Western, guy in that sense. And so I believe that we're all God. I believe that we're all individual and unique expressions of this one singular God that is infinite, whatever you want to call it, God, source, creator, all that is one, whatever, singularity, 0 point. I just call it infinity because it's something you can't define. And as soon as you define infinity, you've now confined it. You've now encapsulated it. And we're allowed to do that. And that's why God has so many different names and so many different, ways to express itself. But so to get rid of all of that, all of the war is just to say, God is all things, no matter what it is, no matter what scale, what size, no matter how different, it's all God and it's infinite. And I believe that's what Jesus understood. I believe Jesus was so integrated into his reality that he understood he was this finite expression of this God, not a father, not a man, not a human man, but this source, this point that is actually not a point in space. You can't point to it and say that is the center of the universe. The center of infinity is all points. You're the center of your universe, and that is absolutely true in an infinite universe. I am the center of my universe, no matter how far apart we are, and we're both right. And that is why I am the God of my universe. You are the God of your universe, and we overlap as a Vesica Pisces. Two spheres overlap, those two energetic signatures, and when those overlap, what does it create? The vortex going down and a vortex coming up into this one singular point that is the center of gravity that we can say is the God source, is the God union between you and I. And that is really what we're trying to get to. And if we don't understand that's what's happening in our relationships, fuck you. I want to start, saying some things and saying you'd be better if you did this. Like, I'm better than you because I do that. And so then we start losing what's really happening between two people or a group of people. And so that's why I love consciousness so much, because that's what, not just learning those concepts, but also embodying it. We're changing the pressure differential. If I say, like, there are things that are, let's say, frustrating about you, if that's the case, I no longer want to say that's what makes me better than you, or that's what makes me have the right to talk down to you, to coach you. If you ever want to tell me anything about my life or reality in general, I have to accept it based on this principle, this new principle of this unified connection between us, that we're no different. We are not two individuals. We are, but we aren't. It's a paradox. We are individually expressed God source,
Yeah.
and that is the unity.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. Last night when I was thinking about what we're going to talk about, just kind of feeling into it.
I wonder what's going to come up.
Well, this is what I saw. I saw this like visual of this human body, and like the different body parts are kind of lighting up. And what came through was, you think of God as the whole human body, and you have this hand and you have this hand, and like, yes, you have a hand over here, but it's still part of the one whole, right? So it's like that fractal that is still not separate from the entire being. And it's like we are these fractals of God experiencing itself, but we are not separate from the entirety of that experience. And wow, what a shift when you can, right? When you actually start engaging with the world around you and the people in your life in that way, recognizing that there is no separation, even though, right, there are boundaries, as we see between you and
clearly
I.
differences.
You are over there, right? But I am you, you are me. It is very empowering. I remember when I first started to comprehend this in some way, it scared the shit out of me. And I was like, because like my whole reality was blown into shreds.
Yeah.
And you remember that feeling. And I was like, my experience there was not near as intense as yours. But
like I said, mine was a turtle. It was a gradual realization of all these things.
I'm thinking of when your world was blown apart with you went down the rabbit hole, right? And you were younger, and you were like, wow, what actually is going on here? I don't know where I was going with that, so I'm just gonna stop.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I love that hand analogy, because if you only think that you're the hand, then there's a war of trying to get resources from the other hand, but missing out on the awareness of the whole body. That's why I believe that God is literally another being, and then there's whatever we think is that God or that being in a finite expression of this universe. I think the physicists are trying to find the limits of the universe, which I think is just kind of like a cell trying to find the limits of a human body. And so then eventually they'll say, I found the edge, but then they'll have the awareness, the cell will have the awareness to see beyond the edge of the human form, which would be like the skin. And then they go, but now I see trees and I see maybe other humans. And so now what is that? And so that is the journey of the cell's consciousness to finding the limitations, because especially the ones deep inside in the middle of a human, they're not going to be able to see it. Just like we're deep inside this universe, let's call it the universe. We're not going to be able to see the edges so clearly. It's very blurry, which is why, scientists are having such a hard time trying to understand that. And they're wondering, like, when are we going to find the end to it? And I'm like, it's infinite. You're not going to find the end. So let's change the way that we're trying to explore. And let's say that, we're trying to explore infinity, so there's no end. And I think once we really realize that, not just physically, scientifically, but also spiritually, there's no end. There's no enlightenment. There's no end to enlightenment.
No place to go. There's no place to go. There's no place to ascend to.
Like, exactly. Like, what do you do at that point? Like, I know so many people that, they've done so many drugs and everything, and then they think that they've seen everything. They've seen where all things come from. And I'm like, well, one, you're still here and you still have to pay bills, electric bills and stuff like that. So you're clearly not able to manipulate them. And even if they think that they can, it's still not like extraterrestrial level where they're making starships, based on organic construction, like literally from their mind, like Dr. Manhattan style in The Watchmen. I don't know if you're familiar with that reference, the blue guy. Highly recommend watching that, at least that character. And so I'm like, we're all still here. And so, to get to that level, like, what would that take? And so we have to basically see what's happening. And ultimately, you know, since I believe physicality is consciousness, consciousness is physicality, or what we think is physical. There's no separation between them. They're literally the same thing. Then we have to understand how these things are moving, and these are the processes that we go through, the awakenings. We might have a prime awakening in the human form in this one lifetime, but hello, we're going to reincarnate. We're going to come back, just like breathing. You know, I don't if I asked you to describe breathing to me, you wouldn't say, well, you just do that, because you're going to say, well, you're going to have to exhale. And so breathing in is the life and the exhalation is the death. But then I'm like, so then what happens after that? And you go, nothing. It's all over. And I go, but I know that everyone would say that's a ridiculous way to describe breathing, because you're going to take in another breath. That is all life's doing. That is all the Big Bang is. The Big Bang is breathing in, and then it will contract. It's literally lungs. The whole thing, everything is doing the same thing. That's why it's all truly one fractal hologram expressed in all these slight differences and all these different scales, all these different frequencies, all these different signatures, densities, whatever characteristics you want to give it. It's all doing the same thing. It's all vibrating. It's all breathing in and out.
Just a different experience, right?
Exactly.
Like your hand came for a really tactile, touchy experience. Your feet came to like ground, to feel the earth, but it's all still part of the one. I love it.
Yeah. And so bringing that into like everyone's unique journey, that's basically all it is. So, you know, I try to do this with people when we do sessions. If anyone wants clarity on what's happening with their experiences, I love going into these things and bringing in physics and trying to give a well-rounded perspective as to what's happening, so that we're not so egotistical and thinking that we're reincarnated Jesus or Buddha or Isis or any Egyptian god that anyone resonates with. You know, all we're doing is it's an ongoing thing. And also on the other end, we don't have to be depressed as to like, you know, why me? Like, why are these aliens, you know, abducting me or contacting me, especially in ways I don't like? It's all for this soul growth, which is literally just, you know, energy, because that's the whole construct of anything. Everything is just energy. So our souls are learning all these different pressure differentials for all these different aspects of life, not just humans, but also if we want to reincarnate into another civilization, not just another culture in humanity, but literally if we want to go to Andromeda and live with those people, they're going to have different pressure differentials that are going to feel really different. And if we don't know what that feeling feels like, and it literally fries us because the balance point is too off from what we're used to, because we're like, you know, we have this thing called currency, and I'm used to kind of lying to people in order to get it. I'm used to numbing my emotional connection in order to get it, which is kind of like, let's say Wall Street. Wall Street, you got to numb yourself. Everyone's a potential object to kind of screw over and kind of, you know, capitalize. That's why we say in competition, we capitalize on the moment. We take the opportunity and we try to manipulate it in some way, usually through deception and usually not caring about how it hurts the other person. And we think that is natural because everything is competing. We think everything's competing for resources and life energy in some sort of way. And I'm just like, sorry, that's just this human thing. Like, do you really think it's that way everywhere? Do you think advanced beings, do you think Jesus was like ascended because he was trying to screw over some other beings and trying to siphon their energy because he didn't have enough of it? Or did he realize he was all of it? And so then the way that he should, because this kind of ties back into, you know, you making money as a nurse, you made more money, or, you know, whatever it is. And so if we're going to start trying to make money or life force or happiness on our own, we're no longer going to resonate with drugs anymore. That's why drugs will wear us out even more, you know, because that's an external source that kind of skews the mind. And as much as we think it expands it. And same with money. Money can be a mind-bending thing. You have $1 billion. I'm sure that's trippy, you know? I'm sure that is a psychedelic experience. And so the real question is, how are we making this exchange of money, this exchange of, emotionality in relationships, because it's all energy, right? Money is energy. And so if we're learning the dynamic flow, and these Wall Streeters, if they ever wanted to reincarnate on some advanced civilization, all they're going to know is how to screw over other people in order to get money or some sort of resource. They will not know how to genuinely connect through love because they didn't exercise it. And so it's going to be a foreign concept for them. And we're learning it, as we take this, journey, not just awakening with information, but literally try to live it. Like you're saying, like, try to make money doing something we love and not try to screw people over, being truly transparent with what's happening so that we're not hiding any information. Like other business gurus will tell you, like, don't tell them everything, hide this, like, don't tell them that, that's maybe broken or something like that. That is distortion. And people can make a lot of money doing that. And they can make a lot of sex, they can make a lot of relationships or acquaintances, they network really well, but how many masks do they put on? Like, how different is it compared to their actual inner feeling? And then ask them, can you actually make a business, make money, make connections and friendship and interest and fame, all with something that you genuinely love? Most people, most business people, and this is my assumption, this is my judgment, so yes, call me out on it, anyone that wants to. My assumption is that people think that they're successful because of the reward that they get. So they think that their business is good because they make money. And so then they say, I love what I do, but I think it's because they get paid. And I'm like, so then why is it that once you and I get behind closed doors, no one's around, no cameras are on, no one can hear us, nothing's being recorded, why is it you start telling me about something completely different than your business? And I've had that happen with some higher profile people, like literally like international businesses in the political realm, literally living with some of these people for almost up to a year. I got in to see them, and that's what it was. His real passion was actually something different than his business. And he was trying to tell me how to make money. And I was like, I'm trying to, whatever I'm literally in love with, trying to make some money doing that is way harder than following the mold of the Matrix.
Right. And this is a whole new like paradigm, right?
And you're coaching people through it, right? You're like helping people, you're doing some groups with them, trying to get them primed for this sort of thing.
And so then that brings up a whole nother program around like, how do you define success? Like, how are we taught to define success? We're taught to define success based on a grade, right, in school. And then you go to the workforce and you're taught to judge success based on how much money do you make. So when you make that
variable
shift, exactly,
out of many.
It is one variable out of many, but it is a very, very predominant variable that when I went into the online space, and I started from zero in my business. And so for me to go into a space that I was super passionate about, knowing that I was starting at zero,
that you're in love with.
That I'm in love with, that I have zero results yet. How do I carry myself? Like, you literally have to become a completely different person, shift your complete belief system, that you're surrounded by this culture of money, so that you can actually like carry some weight in the world around you and actually show up in authenticity. So I had to base my success on my vision of success, my view of success, as no longer being about the money that I was making, because I wasn't making any fucking money yet, but about my authentic contribution to the world, and to portray that in a way that actually came through as I'm not trying to make money here. I'm trying to bring meaningful value to your life.
Which and then you may be interested etheric
in what else I have to offer, because it aligns with a holistic being that cares about mind, body, and soul. So it's been a ride.
Yeah, and you're making it work, and I think that's amazing. Like, I feel like it's so difficult. Everyone has to make some sort of concession as to like how pure can the creation be, or like the business be. And like, my theory is probably the last thing to sell in any sort of way, because it's also not published or anything like that. But yeah, the goal, in my opinion, is to not say I do this on the side. as much as we all do this, because we say we have to pay bills and everything, and it's not exactly what we wanted. And so our goal in this awakening journey is to get more and more into making something that is something we truly love, and something that we would literally show up to, not because of the money. It's almost like we show up to it free. Like you said, we don't make money. And then we say, how do I figure out how to make money? And not so I can buy a boat, and not so I can buy 3 houses, not so I can have the Kardashian lifestyle, because they do their thing. Those people do their thing so they can buy all those things to experience what they think is true freedom, which for them, true freedom is to be able to buy anything they want and literally not be told no. They don't know what no feels like because they have so much money. So when we do this sort of light work and we try to make money doing it, we still have to make money because things do cost things in this world. And so money is a component, but now it's put in a different level of hierarchy and priority. And that's what's so hard, because we're so used to being motivated by money. That is the thing of like, what do I do that sells? And that is backwards from what we're talking about. So everything I made, I did not have a motive in money. Those 3 things, my theory, my mentoring, and my device, none of them were made so I could sell something, obviously. So they were all made because, one, I wanted to know how they worked. I wanted to use them for myself. And then eventually I said, could I help others with this? So it was actually a cause-driven motivation. And then I started seeing, well, I'm going to need more money to refine these things and sculpt it and craft it in a way that others could use it in their varying lifestyles and their varying differences. And that takes some money. And that's why I started learning business, because I realized that was a mechanism. I didn't learn business so I could be an entrepreneur. I tell people, I'm making a device or I'm trying to publish a theory. And they're like, oh, you want to be an entrepreneur? And I said, no, I only learned that because I needed that in order to accomplish this deeper desire. And they're like, that's different. And I'm like, yeah, like, tap in. You gotta tap into these things of like, what would I do if money wasn't an option or an object? Not because I have all the money in the world, but because it doesn't matter. And so then usually people come up with some really weird stuff in their life. And the reason why they toss it aside is because they're like, it would never sell. And I would be struggling for money, and that would be depressing for me. That's why so many people give up on their dreams, don't want to pursue it, because they don't want that change in lifestyle. And hats off to you for staying consistent with it. For anyone that's knows what their desire is, that knows what their heart is desiring in that moment, and then suppresses it through large amounts of caffeine, cigarettes, and alcohol, and movies, and other things that they could be doing, like some hobbies that they're just kind of into. That's most of life. Most of humans right now is that lifestyle right there. And what I love is to bring that out and to get them in such a space where they're like, I had no idea I loved that so much. And the thing that's pushing it away for them is the societal, one, definition of success, and two, making money. So we have to reprioritize those things and really say, I have to let go of, like you said, what I think success is. It's no longer how much money I make and fame, because people think if you're not making money, then you better make attention. You better be famous for doing it. Because if you're famous and you don't have money, they'll still listen to you. You'll still be someone of importance, kind of like a saint or an angel or something like that. And if you make a lot of money and you don't have any fame, like some secret billionaire, then you're still important. But if you have neither, then you're a loser. And that has to go. That concept of you're a loser if you don't have money or attention from a community of people, then it's not worth it. That is not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about love, and that deeper thing is really what I feel the extraterrestrials, the ones we want to connect with and the ones that we want to incarnate with, they're like, yes, that's the shit right there. All the ones that are doing it for money are kind of, the corrupt elites, the Egyptian kind of paradigm, the Anunnaki, the people that are still kind of, promiscuous in their sexual activities, banging other girls' wives, and or other husbands' wives and
Or
stuff like
either it could go either way, really.
yeah, and like doing it for money, and going to planets to kind of mine out resources and not necessarily caring. They don't have empathy. That is the lineage that most of us are coming from, which is why what we're talking about here is so foreign. And literally, I'm sure if anyone else outside of this podcast listening hears any of these things, they would want to rip our heads off for saying these things, because they'd be like, that's not how the world works. And I'm like, that's the
Get
DNA that you're
real.
coming from. Yeah, get realistic. And I'm like, yeah, it's realistic for them because that's what bred us. Those extraterrestrials, the Anunnaki, is the lineage that we came from. And they did operate the way that we're talking about against. In a way, we're kind of saying we need to clean all that stuff up.
Yeah.
That's where we come from. That's why it literally hurts us down into the DNA levels, and why we actually have physical reactions to changing our minds in these ways. It's because it programmed. Those switches, those ons and offs, are switches programmed into our DNA that we came from, and we've been perpetuating for several thousand years. And that's what we're breaking in all of these talks that we're doing. Whenever we talk about something deeper than money and resources and sex, it is something foreign to most people. But that is the etheric love that I believe why Jesus didn't do it because he made a bunch of money. He was a carpenter. I don't think he was a millionaire or anything like that. Giving up his possessions. I'm not saying give them up, but don't be so attached to them. They come and go. We all know this. Even mainstream people know this, but guaranteed, take it away. Take away their McDonald's before work, and they're going to be all pissy about work, So, we're all hypocrites to a degree of, like how much can we really go without, like how, and so doing our life's purpose and love is really going to test us for how much we actually love it, because it's not going to be all rainbows and butterflies and everything.
Right.
It's going to feel like it, because we're going to have those moments, but we're going to have to change a lot of these neural pathways that really make us a different person. And there are mainstream people that we were friends with that are not going to understand us. They're going to have a problem. They're going to be like, hey, you're not the same person, and you used to be more fun, or you used to be different. We could just go out at 1 a.m. and take shots and stuff, and, go to work the next day. And it's like, I have different priorities, and none of those things support that priority. It doesn't mean I'm totally opposed to it. Sure, have some wine, whatever, if you want to have that. But we also have to realize that we're taking away a bit, and we have to take responsibility in our actions. And I think this is where we become our own God. This is how we judge ourselves before death, not waiting after death, and only God can judge me after death. No, we are God. We are judging ourselves, and this is the metric, is our love that we're pursuing. And when we pursue that, the currency is something intangible. That is what most people don't want to hear, because you can't touch it.
The other thing too is that everything else lines up. When you find that bliss state, everything else lines up. And when I first came into the online space, the business that I do, you can do in many different ways. You find your own kind of, I don't want to say niche, like you just find your own zone of genius. That's what I want to say. And you run with it. And I didn't know what my zone of genius was. Like I didn't know what I loved when I first started doing this. And so for me, in the beginning, it became about gratitude. So I just went on this gratitude journey with everybody that was following me. And that was a level of bliss for me. So as I was tapping into that level of bliss through gratitude, doors would open, like connecting with that higher part of myself, my higher self, my super conscious self, because I was opening up to states of gratitude, enabled me to create a pathway, or to find the pathway, to navigate the pathway into my bliss. And I go deeper and deeper and deeper. And as things over here, like in the podcast, I love this. This is blissful for me. This is what I love to do. And what I'm finding is, because I'm enjoying this experience so much, that everything else over there, like in the business and doing the other things, and what allows me to stay at home with my kids, all that stuff lines up. And not just money, relationships, fun experiences, excitement, mystical experience, like everything else comes in when I am in that bliss state as much as possible. And when I'm not in it, I don't ignore the fact that I'm not feeling good or I'm not feeling it at that moment, but I don't let myself get stuck there.
And
I
say,
do
this
the
is my
things that I need.
reality. Like, I guess this
Yeah.
is it.
Yeah. Like go outside, hug a tree, talk to the water, like fucking do something to shift out of that. Feel the feeling, but don't let the feeling overcome you. Don't become
Yes.
the feeling. Don't let it overpower you.
I think what gets hard for people is understanding what could be done. And so, like even you say go out in nature and hug a tree, most normal people would say that's not going to change the way I feel. I'm not going to get less angry because I hugged a tree. This is why I love talking about the physics of so many different things, is because natural things, because if we can understand that hugging a tree actually does do something, and
Yeah.
you're entangling with that tree, and that tree doesn't give a fuck about your work, and like the drama that tree experiences is way more peaceful than what drama there was at work. And so just like talking to a friend that doesn't have drama in their life, why do so many people go to that friend? Because they're like, I can talk to you, I know it's going to feel good, because if I talk to a friend that does have drama in their life, I'm just going to have to hear their drama. And so going out in nature where there's not that same sort of drama, a tree is like, just kind of living in peace, unless you have a guy trying to chop it down, and then it's probably drama filled. But yeah, that's how something like that could really calm us down, because not only are we taking ourselves out of the human drama of not being in a box anymore and like listening to other humans have drama, we're also literally talking etherically with a being that also doesn't have drama, and they're kind of like a peaceful friend. And so those things do matter. And so I think people just don't realize all those things actually count. And that's what, that's the long goal of just like trying to show that it's not just tree hugging. It's not just trying to quiet the mind. It's literally physics all at play. And that's why it works, almost, I can't say every time, because some people might be super angry, and they also might have, like I said, tons of caffeine. Everyone drinks caffeine. A lot of people smoke. A lot of people, put unhealthy things in their bodies, and that makes it really hard to kind of be sensitive, to let the energy flow, to
Yeah.
see something beyond themselves. Because every time I'm frustrated, the best way I get out of it is by trying to see something larger than myself, larger than my next 10 years, let's say 5 or 10 years. And if I can scale my mind, usually, I have to sit still. It's hard to do it while doing something else, but when I can sit still, it may take me just 30 seconds to see something larger than the current moment that I'm upset with. And when I see that larger thing, this current moment starts making more sense because I can wrap my mind around it, right? That's how
Yeah.
we better empower ourselves, is to be able to wrap our minds around it. But if I make this moment so frustrating, I can't wrap my mind around it. My mind is inside it, and that's why I can't see beyond it. So if I take my stillness, I wrap my mind around this experience, I now see something larger, and I alter my consciousness to see something. I expand my consciousness. And then I go, oh, this is actually really just temporary. No matter how much I think it's permanent, I always have a direction. And my biggest frustration was thinking that I didn't have another direction, that thinking that I didn't have anything else going, and that there was nothing at the other side or at the end of the tunnel. That
Yeah.
tunnel is only as long as I want it to be. And,
Exactly.
and my
And the more often you do that, the easier it becomes to access that expanded
and
perspective,
change
right?
the size of the tunnel. You can make it as far as you
Exactly. You can
want.
shorten that tunnel. So my daughter yesterday, she just started college, and she's taking some online courses. She's only 16, so she doesn't want to go to college until she's college age. So she's taking some online courses at a local university. And what happened for us yesterday, and I'm just observing like what is really going on here, is they dropped all of her courses. So she was working on her coursework, everything disappeared. We looked to make sure nothing financially had gone wrong. It didn't. And Sophia was frustrated. However, the level of frustration that she was experiencing and fear was not nearly what it would have been, 3 or 4 years ago, had we not been so intentional about the way that we live our lives and the way that we engage with the world around us and the way that we observe. And so she called me, and I was like, okay, well, let's just go step by step. Let's make the phone calls we need to make. And so this was a huge growth experience for her. And we just stayed calm through, like, what the actual F is going on here? This is so bizarre. She had put in a good 10 hours of work into her schoolwork so far. And she was like, well, I hope it doesn't disappear. And I said, well, let's just assume it's not and go from there. What ended up happening is they thought that she was a fraudulent student because of her age. And I don't know, maybe this is a thing. People embezzle federal funds. I don't know. I'm sure it is a thing. So so she had to go in so they could see that she was a real physical person and show her license. And then everything was restored. It was that simple. It was 3 phone calls, which may not seem simple. That we got transferred and had to make a couple more phone calls. And then she physically had to go in and show her ID, and everything was restored. Now, had we blown up that experience and been so pissed off and been so emotional about it, that experience would have been completely different. We shortened the tunnel with intention by staying grounded, staying centered, and just going through the steps. Just do what you got to do. It's cool. It's going to be fine. And expecting that everything was going to turn out fine. Just expecting this was a learning experience. So everything's cool. Everything's cool now.
That's awesome.
So that's just like a practical application.
One of many too. I mean,
one of many. So, okay. So we're at 2 hours. So I got to go get James from school, actually. So we're going to wrap this up. Before we go, someone is asking, do you have a YouTube channel? Do you have a YouTube channel?
I don't. Honestly, I haven't really been crazy far out in the publishing space. I'm more of a private person. I love talking about these things and obviously having, public conversations and everything, but the business side of all of this has just been foreign to me. And so that's been something I've been personally learning, of just that business mindset of something that I'm truly passionate about and that I do for free anyway.
So you're on, and you have quite a few videos on Instagram.
I've kind of taken a step back, and I was mainly publishing those videos just as kind of like a public diary in a way, because I know people like hearing these things, and I like exploring these thought concepts in a way where I'm talking to a stranger. And
it's captivating.
Well, thank you. I know the production of it isn't the best in terms of audio quality and lighting and everything and all of that. But yeah, right. But I would like to do more, here in the near future, but I've been primarily focused on, cleaning up my theory. It's pretty much done in terms of the content. Same with the device. So the device is now on like a third version from when I started back in 2018. I started fiddling with it, making a skeleton of it, understanding like what I'm actually trying to do with it. And then made a 2.0. Now this one is actually blowing all the other ones out of the water by far. And there's so many good principles in it to make it a really comprehensive resonance therapy device that also is pretty commercial and user friendly. So you can
so we can find you on Facebook.
So yeah, you can connect with me on Facebook and Instagram.
And I put their links in the description of this video. So you're Jack Coleman, Coleman on Facebook. Yep. And then what's your Instagram at Jack? I feel like it's
I think different. It's like JAECOLEM. So it should be J Comb.
And then tell us, so do you have a timeline for this energy device?
It keeps changing because something else keeps popping up. And so I have to keep pivoting in some sort of way. Something might not have worked, or maybe there's not enough money to finish it. That's basically what happened last year. And so I just kind of put it on hold and just, kept researching to try and incorporate some more principles and everything, try to make it more holistic. So there's always something, and I always think it's a month away, and there's something else. So I'm expecting between 1 and 3 months, 3 months at the far end, and then I can start taking some pre-orders. I don't know how I'm
Awesome.
necessarily going to do it in terms of a reservation price, because it will be
Yeah.
a couple $1,000s around that area. But it's well worth it. In term, we didn't even talk about, what's in it and what it does and how you could use it in all these different ways. But it's super cool. So we could do that another time, because
Yeah.
it's
When you're close to launch, why don't you come back on the podcast and we can talk specifically about the energy device? And when you do launch it, if people want to stay in touch with you or find you or even do any
or just
sort of
talk with me
coaching,
even beforehand. Yeah.
are
So
you
I'm
doing do we find you then just reach out to you like on Instagram or Facebook Messenger to connect with
yeah.
you to do something like that?
So that's basically how I've left it, for forever. Since I started doing it was, I just make posts on my social media, and I usually just write them because I want people to just read them, and it helps
Hmm.
me because I ramble a lot, as you know.
It's
And
all good
so
stuff. It's all
yeah,
good.
I like the rambling because for me, I'm exploring. But when I write, in social media, you only get so much time, and
Yeah.
before people shut down. And so I try to write them out in script or in text, and it helps me refine, because I sit there for about 10 minutes and I try to write this so that it fits like one picture. And so, if people like it, then they end up messaging me and they're like, "Hey, I have this experience, or I'm kind of confused about this thing in life." And then we open up a dialogue and then end up doing a longer session, which, usually they're longer because there's so much that people want to open up with. It's rare that it's like a 30-minute thing. It's like, all right, I'm good. It's usually some pretty heavier things, and I love exploring that, like these deeper concepts. So it could be anywhere from like one to, I had one random one pop up over the summer, and it was a marathon. It was literally 11 hours. I thought it was a 30-minute call, and
Oh my
we
you
straight 11 hours straight. I think one
what?
bathroom break. And both of us, we didn't get off the call either. And this guy made his own AI, and back in like 2007, I think he first started making his own AI, and then started doing competitions in like 2012 or 14, and like winning them, and connected with him, and he was asking me about stuff. And then I was like, "Hey man, you just want to get on a call?" Because it's way easier than texting. I don't like texting, and especially for this, I don't like texting this, because I can easily say something, and then you're like, no, 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 you're not just gonna gloss over that and go to the next sentence, because there's so much that we have to unpack in terms of these concepts and how it's all connected. And so that's why I like the conversation, because we can then move it in real time. And so usually they're around like 2 to 4 hours, but it's really however long you want to make it. And so I'm open to that. If you want to explore these things in life, if it's experience you have, even if it's something local like a relationship at work, or with friends or family. I've had plenty of people that are just like, I need to learn how to better connect with my partner,
Mhm.
and I don't know how to do it. And I like that you're using all these far out concepts to do it. And I'm like, yeah, that's my style. That's my approach. And so that's generally how it goes, is people just kind of message me and
Reach
just like,
out. So just message you. Awesome.
yeah, so just message. I'm usually pretty responsive in that. And but once I get the actual finalization of the device done, and which I have it all in my mind. I have almost all the parts. There's just some core parts that I have that I need to get custom made too, and then put it all together. Once I get that, then I'll be able to take orders, because from then I have everything else put in place. So it should be good, and then we
Perfect.
can talk more about it. So, and if
All
you're
right.
interested in that beforehand, just let me know. We can always talk about it before we get on another call.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Jack. So
Awesome. Thank you.
we will definitely have you back on closer to the launch of the product because I really want to dive deep into that
Sweet.
as well. So thank you so much, everyone. To access Jack's Instagram and Facebook, I do have links in the description. So have a wonderful day, everyone, and we'll be back next week. Bye.
See ya.